Endeja investment in that regard. Good morning to you, Mr. Goodbert.
Good morning, Priscilla.
How are you?
Good morning, our viewers. I'm very well.
I want to first find out, how did you first get in reference to coffee?
So basically, I come from Ntungamo, and most of Ankole is a big coffee player. So when we were growing up, one of the biggest things in Ankole was the Banyankole Kwetarana Union, a cooperative union. And so this is most of Ntungamo is an agricultural community. It's livestock, it's crop, mainly matoke and coffee. So every household either had a coffee shamba and a matoke plantation. So in other words, if you grew up in most of Western Uganda, and I believe in other parts like Eastern Uganda, there is a coffee culture that is connected to these households. So as I, started, doing some activities, agriculture activities, I went into matoke farming, but mainly as a hobby, because I like farming. Farming, if you do it, if you have the means and the resources to do it, it's actually therapeutic. That you go to the farm, you are working, you're providing labor, but actually you are kind of like enjoying what you are doing.
All right.
So I'm doing coffee, I'm doing matoke, and one of my colleagues who does extension services comes to help me, and he looks at the land that I have and said, by the way, you can make a lot of money from coffee. And
you are making a lot of money from coffee right now?
Actually, my first harvest, my first crop was last year. So normally when you do coffee at about 3 years, you have the first crop. So this is really at a low level. So really my big harvest is coming in this season, where I project that I should be able to harvest some 50 bags of dry chiboko.
All right. We also are joined by Moses Shidega, who's Secretary for Labor and Works National Youth Council. Good morning to you, Moses.
Good morning, Priscilla, and good morning to our viewers.
What is the closest relation that you have with coffee besides drinking it?
I think besides drinking it, I don't have a much more deeper relationship with coffee. But what I know is that it is an essential cash crop in this country that so many Ugandans and young Ugandans in this case have managed to earn a living out of. So my interest in the coffee sector is more from what does it bring to us as a country. I don't have direct participation, but I think it's a cash crop that we need to focus on because of the benefits that it has accrued to us as a country over time, but also how much it has demonstrated to be of good benefit to the country.
Okay, all right. Now he has stated that it's a very important cash crop. This cash crop has been a talking point since February, when we did have government getting into bed with one of coffee investors, and then there was a probe into how that exactly went down. That report is out, but we want to find out the background of it with this story.
William Museveni persuaded the 6 MPs on the Trade Committee to backtrack on their recommendation to terminate the coffee agreement between the government and Uganda Vinch Coffee Company. Despite agreeing with MPs on the legal gaps in the agreement and the financial inability of the company to develop the sector, the president was concerned that terminating the contract would send a bad signal to other investors. Instead, the president called for a review of the contract. So the committee members gathered today to consider the findings of their colleagues who met with the president. The meeting agreed to present the report without any adjustments.
By the time even we went to the president, we had signed the report. All of us had signed and submitted. So there is no we withdraw the report to resign.
So we are only waiting for the speaker to put it on the order paper, and it be read as it is.
Any attempt to disorganize, any attempt to interfere with the findings of a committee of parliament is illegal and outside our rules of procedure.
The meeting heard from the parliament's legal department, who guided that any adjustments to a report already signed by members would be against the parliamentary rules of procedure. Even suggestions to have the president's views incorporated in an addendum were rejected by MPs. Instead, the committee suggested that the Prime Minister, who is the lead of government business in Parliament, the Attorney General or any other legislator who is not a committee member, can present the president's views on the floor after the report has been presented. Other MPs are anxiously waiting to debate the report after learning that it will be part of tomorrow's order paper.
We want to look at the findings, we want to look at the recommendations, and we maturely discuss of how this matter should be resolved. Fundamentally, the people, the lower people, One's interest must be protected.
We are hoping no one has tampered with this report, no one has tried to change what the committee decided and concluded on.
Let us discuss and deliberate. We are here to represent the Wananchi, not an individual. I want to assure you.
Coffee is one of Uganda's leading export earners. A total of 402,212 of 60 kilo bags of coffee, valued at 221 billion shillings, were exported in January 2022. Herbert Ziwa, NTV.
So much, Herbert Ziwa, for that compilation. It does give us a preamble into the conversation today. Stand off of a coffee deal. We're going to be later joined by opposition leader Dr. Kizza Besigye in this very same conversation, because he too has shared his 2 cents about it and how it should directly be affecting Ugandans in a positive and way forward manner. Turning to you, Mr. Godba, we get to see this unprecedented president seeking to make changes on the committee in regards to the report that has come out and this is after deliberations. This shouldn't be the case, right?
It shouldn't be the case, and you know, this is a matter that that has drawn a lot of emotions, and I think genuinely, I look at coffee at 3 fundamental levels. Coffee as a livelihood crop, that for probably over 5 million households in this country engaged in coffee farming, coffee business. So that's a huge percentage of the population. For many of us who went to school in the old days, coffee flows in our blood, because really without coffee we would never go to school. I wouldn't be here talking to Uganda's Priscilla. So coffee as a livelihood crop, as a household cash crop. At the second level, I look at coffee as a strategic economic crop that both historically and today we know that coffee has been the largest foreign exchange earner for Uganda. And if government was disciplined enough to be able to invest in it and organize the coffee enterprise, we probably should be beating everybody around the world in terms of the coffee exports and coffee value addition along the entire value chain. So this is a strategic economic crop that should not be handled in a laissez-faire manner. The way this Vinci coffee deal was negotiated and came into being is so casual that you don't feel like you have a government that understands the strategic nature of the crop. And thirdly, I consider coffee to be a national security crop, a strategic security crop. Because if you have probably close to 10 million Ugandans engaged in economic activities around coffee, and you can actually expand the number of Ugandans engaged in business. There are many young people around the country who do not have jobs, who do not have a livelihood. A very strategic and focused investment in coffee can expand the range of opportunities along the value chain, and therefore to that extent it becomes a strategic national security crop. So anybody, for me, who interferes with the coffee, you actually are undermining our national security as a country. And my view is that I still believe that the guys who negotiated that deal, when you look at its provisions, and those who are trying to promote it in its form, because you know the NRM people and President Museveni keep on singing patriotism. I don't see anything that you can tell me that anybody who sat and negotiated that deal and signed on it is patriotic. Patriotism, you have to do it by action, by seeing the things that you do, not by just preaching as if this is a religion. Patriotism is not a religion. It's patriotism, and it needs to be addressed by action and conduct. And I don't see it in that deal. Okay, all right. Moses, in your capacity, you're a law student, and by law, is this actually permissible? Well, in the law, there is something called freedom of contract, that parties are free to sign
a contract and put in terms and conditions that they agree upon. And when those terms are agreed upon, what the court does is then it can read into terms of the contract, but usually court is very slow in terms of trying to imply terms of a contract. So usually it takes the contract as it is. But I think that as a law student, there are shortcomings in this particular contract. And to me, because the principle of quid pro quo, something for something, that before you contract, yes, you make a promise between parties. I think that the government of Uganda did make a promise to Vinci Company, a promise which I don't think they were in position to make, because I don't think that the government of Uganda has coffee that they can offer to this particular Vinci Company. So because this coffee is going to come from the coffee farmers like Godba here. So I think there are shortcomings in the contract, but termination of the contract would not be, I think that is extreme. We can review certain clauses in the contract and then maybe amend or repeal some of this.
And what are some of those particular clauses that you feel, if reviewed, could actually make it a better contract?
I think that for the level of investment and for the level of commitment that the government of Uganda is offering to Vinci Company, and versus the benefits that we hope to attain from this particular contract, I think there is a mismatch. For example, look at the jobs that are anticipated to be created. There are only about 250 jobs, at least according to the contract.
And that does not benefit the youth, in which you're representing on the Youth Council.
It benefits, but I think that 250 jobs versus the 10-year taxation relief and all these taxation benefits that the company is going to benefit from, I think it does not match with the benefits that Ugandans hope to get at the end of the day. So I think that Uganda is giving in too much and getting very less out of this contract. Okay,
all right. Joining us for this conversation, the coffee standoff deal, and we get to look at the report. It's going to be tabled this afternoon in Parliament. Joining us to also deliberate this conversation is Dr. Kiza Besigye. Good morning to you, Doctor. Okay, all right. Dr. Kiza Besigye, we want to find out from you, given the fact that the president wanted to make some adjustments to the report before it's presented to the people that actually called for this report, the parliamentarians. Do we find this unprecedented, the president seeking to make changes on a committee report after deliberations?
Well, frankly, I don't think that it makes a difference. At the end of the day, Mr. Museveni is Parliament. And whatever goes on before, whether the report goes to Parliament before or after or whatever, his will be served. And so I personally consider all of it as simply as emotions. We have seen even where Parliament has made resolutions, formally made resolutions as a whole, as Parliament, not as a committee. And the following day, Mr. Museveni calls them and they come back and adopt a completely different resolution, removing what they had decided. So I think we should really stop pretending that our Parliament is an independent organ of state that oversees the executive and that takes decisions on behalf of the people of Uganda. We have a rubber stamp parliament, period.
All right. The other thing that the president is also stating is that in his view, he believes that if this contract is cancelled, it's going to keep away other investors from coming into bed with government. Do you agree with his view?
You see, investors should only be welcome if their investment is in the best interests of Uganda, not just in the best interests of investors. And what has frankly happened is that we have simply opened our country to all forms and manner of fake investors, In fact, good investors will never come to Uganda as long as the investment climate is as it is, that you have a very high political risk because you have an establishment that is unpopular, and that is a fact because they see investors make research. They know what happened in the last elections. They know how many people had to be killed in order for Mr. Museveni to eventually be sworn in as president. They know what he has to do. They know what he has to do to remain in power. So they know the political cost. They know the corruption, the environment of corruption that persists in the country, the systemic corruption. Those are the matters that real investors, not fake investors, will be concerned about and will not come to Uganda because of that. You know, I was reading yesterday that there are 5 roadblocks between Busia and Bustema, a distance of about 30 kilometers. 5 roadblocks trying to, I don't know, of revenue authority and whatever. You don't find that kind of nonsense between Malaba and Mombasa. So as long as there are other roadblocks in Uganda, we shall only get fake investors. So these fake investors are in reality not investors, they are the junta itself, people in the government who just look for foreign clothes to put on to deceive Ugandans that these are foreign investors. At the end of the day, you find that what are investors are funded by the poor Ugandans. They don't bring in any money. That coffee, scam is by a person who has come as a foreign investor in a hospital for which we have already sunk billions, hundreds of billions of our money to what is supposed to be a foreign investor. So all that is just crap. The foreign investors will come running as long as the investment climate in Uganda is correct. The investment climate in Uganda is today not attractive.
The investment climate that Dr. Kanukiza is referring to, he's saying high political risk, we do have the bad corruption environment, that these things do not enhance the investment climate. In your view, what is the investment climate right now? Because if we're having such deals signed through, I'm pretty sure the Vintry company made their research, and so maybe there are loopholes through the government. We can pass through here, put up such a deal, and we can actually go through. Now that shows you again, there's some challenges within the investment environment. So for you, what are the loopholes you're saying in the investment environment, and what are the remedies perhaps?
I'm sorry, I think that is, the investment climate is really a consequence of our discussion, because there are fundamental issues that we need to deal with as a country. My view is that this coffee deal is part of the ongoing state capture, where you get a group of people who capture the institutions of state and use them to profiteer. Because you see, and Ugandans will really have to be careful, because if we are not, I don't know what we are going to remain with. Because right from 1995, for me, I've been following evidence of President Museveni and the people around him, essentially taking away everything from Ugandans. So in the 1995 Constitution, the 2005 Constitution Amendment, they took away minerals from the trust property. You know what? Because under the 1995 Constitution, we said key natural resources, that is minerals, forests, water, wildlife, are held in trust for the people of Uganda. So in other words, every state, every government must exercise a certain responsibility to make sure that Ugandans enjoy these resources. In 2005, through a constitutional amendment, Mr. Museveni and the parliament then took away those resources. We have seen over time the regime taking away all the open spaces in this town and elsewhere. So President Museveni has been saying, now if you want to demonstrate, you go to Kororo, or if you want to protest. But you see, Kororo is a military garrison.
Yes, guarded.
Yeah? Yeah. You go to Constitutional Square, it was taken away. The Constitutional Square would be that space where if you are angry, annoyed with anybody here or with government, you just go there and chill.
And as of yesterday, I saw Bibati around it, so I don't know what
exactly.
means.
So basically, the regime has been taking almost everything. So for me, the coffee is one of the things that they are taking, because they have already taken sugar, by the way. When you hear of these companies all over the place, Atiak, Hoima Sugar, there are distortions within these crop systems that essentially put farmers at a disadvantage. Now we are seeing coffee, because I don't understand how a government can go and contract over a crop that is grown by farmers, owned by individuals. That if government wanted to, if the regime wanted to sound smart and look smart, they needed to have been discussing with us. They are big farmers. Me, I'm one of the footnotes, but they are big people engaged in the coffee industry. They are doing farming. They are doing value addition. They are even progressing to make value addition. The responsible people needed to have sat with these people and say, how do we do value addition? Let me make one last comment. I think that President Museveni is a very disingenuous president, because I don't see why he actually, why he has really made it his point to demobilize all institutions of state. Because the committee was there doing its probe, doing its inquiry. If he wanted to appear as a respondent, he needed to have appeared before the committee. In most cases, he summons these committees to his house or to our house and meets with them. So he had an opportunity to meet the committee. Okay. And the fact that he didn't, he needs to understand that this country belongs to Ugandans. It doesn't belong to him that you can order everything just to be done the way you want.
Moses, good boy here is saying that our leader is a disingenuous leader, but then he's the very same leader who has been fronting youth, especially in terms of agriculture being the answer to the young people today. Why isn't your voice as young people prominent in this conversation right now?
Well, I don't think that our voice is not prominent, and I think partly that's why I'm here.
What are the indicators that it is prominent?
To air out the views of the young people. I think that first and foremost, I want to applaud the Honorable Mwine Mpaka Committee for the job well done. I think they did unpack the shortcomings in this particular agreement, and to me this speaks to the aspect of the doctrine of separation of powers. And contrary to what, with due respect, retired Colonel Kiza Besigye mentioned earlier on, that there is almost no distinction between what Parliament is doing versus what the executive is doing. I think that the executive has succumbed to the pressure from Parliament, and this has been because of the investigations.
Which Parliament is only doing their due diligence to protect the young people of Uganda from falling prey to such deals.
Exactly. So I think that Parliament, well, I think they've had shortcomings in the past, but I think we should cut them some slack. They've done an amazing job.
When you say pressure, please help us understand exactly what you're meaning.
Well, I think that many Ugandans have not paid attention. The executive
succumbs to pressure.
They have succumbed to the pressure because now we are seeing the executive attempting to actually negotiate with Parliament. And they're saying that...
in your view, who do you believe is actually pressurizing them?
I think the pressure, of course, comes from Parliament, which in turn represents the people. But I think, Priscilla, what this, to me, speaks out broadly is the economic strategy of our country. I think it is more outward-looking than inward-looking. I want to take you back to 1930, when Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of State of the USA, introduced the Smoot-Hawley tariff. And the idea was that how can we protect the domestic and local investors from foreign direct competition? And they did so by levying a 20% increase in taxation of imports on agriculture and other industrial goods. I think that Uganda's economic strategy needs to be reviewed. We focus more on, yes, attracting investors, but at the expense of the domestic investors. So to me, my heart goes out to the coffee farmers and to any other Ugandan who has been benefiting from this particular coffee process, that the process through which this contract came into place, I think there were shortcomings. And if you saw the tweet by the Honorable Frank Tumwebaze, who is the Minister of Agriculture, him distancing himself from the agreement, to me that clearly stipulates and shows that the process was not duly followed. Consultation, like Godby was trying to say earlier on, was not exhausted fully. And when such steps are skipped, then we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place like we are finding ourselves today.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Well, the one thing that everyone agrees on is that government is trying to create an environment in which the cash crop that you talked about is being enhanced and trying to find a way to boost it for international trade, regional trade, and so forth. But Godby, in your capacity, let's talk about how actually the efforts of government are watering down on the expansion of coffee within other regions of market play.
You know, to be honest, we should give credit to government. The government has tried it has tried to invest in agriculture. I have many disagreements with the way they do it, but I think at the broad level, you can say there is an effort. There are men and women out there in the various agencies of government trying their best. I think the guys in the Coffee Development Authority, they have been really trying. I have reservations about Operation Wealth Creation because I think it's a distorting operation. I would advise it could have been done better. But I think that in Ministry of Agriculture, there are people working, trying their best. That's why you've seen that our coffee production has been, our coffee exports, production and exports have been increasing. Right now, averaging about 7 million bags per year. But you see, when you go back to the coffee development strategy, I think it's 2012, the target was that we should be exporting 20 million bags by 2020. Now we're in 2022, we're at 7 million bags. That target now has been revised to be hit by 2025, and you can see, realistically, you cannot. And now, me as a coffee farmer, I think I have clarity on what government can do to basically ratchet up coffee production on a year-by-year basis. So
let's hear those recommendations from
on year-by-year basis. So this is the point. Right now, the biggest crisis we are facing as coffee farmers, as the industry, is the policy distortion created by this thing called parish development model. Because money for coffee seedlings was moved from UCDA and to put into a non-existing process called parish development model, because this thing is just starting. You are talking of an industry that is already ongoing. Farmers have already opened up land for planting. UCDA cannot provide them with seeds because the policy of government has been that coffee farmers are provided with seedlings.
And the ones that have actually been provided with seedlings, the seedlings have gotten to a stage where they now need to be transferred to the actual farms, which government is supposed to take back and then distribute. But then government can handle that.
That's the point that I was going to make, that the coffee seedling suppliers are stuck with seedlings.
Exactly.
So in other words, on the demand side, the farmers will need seedlings. On the supply side, the nursery bed operators need money to supply seedlings. So you can see how a decision of government can completely distort an entire sector, because what that means is that the progress towards coffee production, the volumes have been tampered with by this wrong decision. Secondly, I mean, as a farmer, I keep on looking around. I say, I need to make sure that my coffee is not subjected to hostile weather conditions. In Ntungamo, sometimes drought can be very intense. And you go there and you look at your shamba and you see how it's drying up and say, man, I should be doing irrigation. And at my level of education and understanding, I should not be held hostage to, adverse weather conditions. You go look for financing for doing irrigation. And then you begin to hear stories of all all kinds of things, whether it's Microfinance Support Center, Uganda Development Bank. I am a very small farmer, so it's unlikely that you will get money from there. Then they will tell you about this thing called Agriculture Credit Facility, which is run out of central bank with commercial banks. You talk to the commercial banks people, you see that there is no clarity. In other words, what I'm saying, that government of Uganda can really sit and organize itself around coffee, because as I said, this is a livelihood, a strategic economic and strategic security crop. We need to find some of those things where we can mobilize and say we do this very well. But right now, that you get this woman who took billions of money to Ruboa, and basically we don't know where she put it, and then you say she's the one going to do coffee. My research tells me that she has a number of road contracts in the Albertine region. So you can't be the company, the investor who does everything without doing anything. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Going back to Dr. Kizza Besigye, in reference to what Godbert Mshawe here has said, as far as his little experience in coffee farming, he has been opened his eyes to the fact that there's policy distortion. There's also the subjection to hostile weather conditions in which they are actually trying to grow coffee as farmers, credit facility failures. And the big question now comes, how can government actually sit down, organize itself around this cash crop that has the potential to actually take this country to another level economically?
You see, it can't. And I think that's the point that Godba started with. When you have a state capture of the type that we have, the victim, the first and major victim, is institutions. So once institutions are captured and cannot function professionally and independently, you will have policy distortions that Godba is talking about. They are inherent in the state capture apparatus. You'll have policy distortions, because the focus of the regime is not on the farmers and their welfare. It is on how the state capture can be maintained. It's on regime survival. So this shift, whether it is to wealth creation, wealth creation, whether it is the Bagagawale, whether it is the parish model or whatever, the intention of all that is not the welfare of people and that they are thriving. The intention of all that is politics of how to keep, people somehow hopeful that something is happening as they are going on with their other schemes. Secondly, I'm surprised that Godba is crediting the government with financing agriculture, because even as at a continental level, knowing that agriculture is one of the areas where the African continent has an advantage, it was decided many years ago that at least within Africa, the investment in agriculture should not be lower than 10%. In Uganda, the share of agriculture, and this is indeed, we say Uganda is an agricultural country. Indeed, I think about 70% of the Ugandans derive their livelihood from agriculture, but the investment in agriculture has been hovering around 3 to 4%. So the investment in agriculture itself is very, very low. And the policies are definitely wrong. The institutions are dead. I'm surprised that indeed even Godba is talking about institutions within agriculture facilitating people. We used to have the agriculture extension services, which were eventually shifted, I don't know, to what was called the NADS, and then later on the confusion and so on. people who are in agriculture are largely on their own, especially those who are not maybe as informed or have the possibility of getting information as Godba may have. Ordinary people are on their own. The things they use in agriculture, you know, if you look at the agrochemicals that are on the market in this country, you can cry, because possibly 90% or more of what people buy very costly at very high level cost are fake and don't work. You know, I have been trying to produce some vegetables here in Kasangat. Last season, I planted about 5 acres of tomatoes, and this, when I got to know that we are in trouble. You start with the seeds. The seeds are fake. You go into whatever you will use. Fertilizers in this country, getting fertilizers is such a huge problem. So the whole sector is in a mess, and not surprisingly, because of the main point that Godba made. Once you have the state capture of the type that we have, then the focus is not on the population, it's not on the people, it is on those who have captured the state, sustaining themselves in control of the state at any cost. It's like when Congo belonged to King Leopold. You know, Congo is in the kind of mess that it is because of the time it spent as a property of King Leopold. Uganda is going to be in as much mess for as long as it is the property of the family of Mr. Museveni. That is where the things, unless we liberate our country. And this is why, even now, I am in captivity. I cannot get out of my gate, because I said I want to start actively waking up people to make a demand. Unless the citizens of Uganda make effective demand.
And Doctor?
And effective demand is not just having needs. It is putting action behind their needs that will light a fire on the regime.
All right.
Then they can start being a serious citizen.
Doctor, so from your standing point of view, how do we get to liberate our coffee in Uganda?
Well, it starts with liberating the country itself. That's the point that Godba was saying. As long as we have the state capture in the form that it is, that all institutions are controlled, managed, or mismanaged by, one person or the one family who used the military. I have been saying that the military is a captured institution also, because I was part of the military that captured Uganda's power in 1986. But even as the power of Uganda was being captured by the National Resistance Army, the National Resistance Army itself was captured by the family of Mr. Museveni, and that's why we even now are talking about the succession within the family, and indeed within the military.
Okay, Doctor.
So these are the fundamental issues that must be solved, not only for us as citizens, but even for the investors that we are talking about. You will not have genuine investors coming in an environment like we have today.
Okay.
And the freeing of the country will have to be undertaken by citizens, first of all, appreciating the situation in which they are, that all their wealth is captured. We are talking about coffee, but talk about oil. You've been hearing Mr. Museveni saying, my oil.
Well, our focus is on coffee this morning, because in the afternoon, this debate is also going to be appearing on the floor of Parliament. And so actually I want to find out from you, what do you want to see members do in regards to this debate as it appears on the floor of Parliament? What decision do you want them to make amidst the environment that you speak of?
You see, it is to if they have the capacity to do that, it is to go back to the owners of the coffee, because Parliament, Uganda government does not own coffee. Coffee is owned by us, people who plant it in our gardens. There is no government coffee farm anywhere in Uganda. So the coffee farmers, organized in their various ways, are the ones that should be engaged. They are the ones that should be, the Parliament should just be a facilitator. And that's where they should take it. But as we've been saying, that is not likely to happen.
All right.
Because the coffee farmers simply have no power. We withdrew Uganda from the coffee ICO, International Coffee Organization.
Which I also wanted to find out from you. Our withdrawal from the International Coffee Organization, what is the repercussion for us as Uganda in the wake of a conducive environment of coffee as a cash crop?
Pardon?
What are the implications that we are yet to suffer in the long term with the withdrawal from ICO?
Well, it is the starting point is the uncertainty, because we withdrew with what alternative strategy, and have the coffee farmers been engaged with that strategizing? So I frankly don't know. The immediate one is I think the fact that we cannot have any prediction of how the marketing process is going to be.
Okay.
And especially when we are a disorganized market like ours. You know, in all these products, you know, if you, for example, see the coffee prices for Uganda, depending on the quality, you find that although we are talking about 7 million bags, but of what quality? So you may find somebody who's producing half our coffee earning more from the coffee than we produce.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor.
Of the internal, both the internal questions of the industry, but also the marketing policy. Okay. So now that we are outside what has been known, we are in the unknown area.
All right. Back to you, Moses, here, Chidega. We have been having this conversation about coffee, farming, investment climate, and all the risks that are faced with coffee right now. But then again, how do we also get to extend this conversation to involve the young people in terms of your capacity?
Thank you, Priscilla. Priscilla, in 1938, there was a trade ordinance that was passed. And the ordinance was that Africans were limited from participating in grinding of coffee and processing of cotton, but also they were limited from exporting and importing of any productive good. So I don't think that the situation today is what Kano Kisa basically is trying to portray, or what Godbert is trying to portray, that the farmers have been completely relegated out. I think that the contract in itself, because there's a clause that actually offers protection to the farmers, although I think it is insufficient in its explanation, but it offers protection to the farmers and to the producers of coffee. So my view is that yes, we have to review the clauses in this contract, but by and large there are benefits that the country stands to benefit from this contract.
Do you buy into the recommendation for this contract to be completely cancelled?
No, I don't think it should be repealed entirely. I think there are certain clauses that are good for us as a country, but also some clauses that need to be repealed.
And which ones are those that, in your view, need to be repealed?
I think that the taxation burden that the country is going to shoulder at the expense of this company is quite too high, because you look at the 10-year tax holiday being given to them, and then you look at clauses where government has to meet the costs, where the law does not provide for tax exemptions, then government therefore has to meet the cost that that would have been levied on this particular company. So I think that clauses around taxation to me are shortcoming and they need to be reviewed. But also, if you look at the document itself, you can barely trace the benefit that is going to be accrued or generated to the ordinary Ugandan. Besides the 250 jobs being mentioned, in the contract. You can barely trace what exactly are Ugandans going to take away from this contract. So I think as young people and young people who have failed to find formal employment and are therefore, you know, have gone ahead to participate in agriculture, I think that what Vinci Coffee is offering to do issues around value addition can be done by the ordinary farmers. The issue is, can government go ahead to set aside maybe economic benefit or...
Well, we have an ordinary farmer here.
No, because
in your ordinary farming, can you sort out that issue that Moses is referring to?
You see, to be honest, you guys, that's why I'm actually, I'm very, very disturbed by this thing. Because you see, I want to emphasize the point that Dr. Wesige made, that besides the investments that I've talked about, the investments in the coffee industry by government, they are minimal. They are not what I would want to see. But I recognize the fact that there's something being done.
Yeah. The other thing,
but more importantly,
as you put in your submission, our withdrawal from the ICO internationally, or the repercussions. Doctor talks about there's no alternative strategy that has been offered to the local farmers. He's talking about have the coffee farmers been given, other aids, other incentives that will then aid them to still be participatory, and also making the process easier.
Yeah. So I was basically saying, Priscilla, that more importantly, the coffee industry has been now growing on its own. That the people who are participating, the farmers, the traders, they have been moving on its own. So the industry, besides the little investment that government has been making, there is a lot of push that is models like self-organizing. I know many farmers and entities that are organizing, going into value addition. My own company, Taleco Farms, we are developing a full value chain operation. So in other words, we've started at the farm. Our interest is not to go and sell chiboko the way my grandparents did. No, I am going to be... if the government of Uganda was to provide the financing and the incentives that they are giving to Vinci, I would be the one focusing on how do I get my coffee and be able to sell coffee that has value, that where I've added value. So this whole Moses, I really sympathize with you.
Okay,
Vinci doesn't.
Maybe in Moses's capacity, how can the young people actually be engaged in active participation of coffee and the discussions thereof entailing production and trade of coffee?
You see, there's always this excitement about young people, and we want young people to do everything. And me, as a practitioner, I see the limitations, Moses. That so if I go to Ntungamo, my company has developed an initiative. We call it Tal Micro Coffee Farms. We are working with farmers because these are things I'm learning, because me, when I do things as a researcher, I am also learning. I go out there and then I realize that there are many of our people who have idle land. Households that cannot use the land because they don't have money, they can't invest. I can tell you, colleagues, that it is an ordinary household in Ntungamo or elsewhere across this country has no capacity to invest in an acre of coffee. It's expensive. So under Tal Micro Coffee Farms, we are planning to develop at least a minimum of 1,000 acres of coffee in Ntungamo district alone. And you know how big that can be.
Which speaks now, me, I would imagine self-organization.
Yes, self-organizing. Now, me, I would say, if I was government of Uganda, I need to be able to test out those initiatives and say, can Tale Eco Farms deliver on this? The young people become part of this enterprise, of this organizing, of this organizing. But to say that, oh, we have so many young people, so they should go and grow coffee. Many of them have nowhere to grow coffee, really, because some at any one time especially when I'm doing weeding of my plantation, I have approximately 40 women, some 20 young people working on the farm. Okay. And for me, the issue then, if I was government of Uganda, I would be working with Taleco Farms or any of the companies to say, how do I make sure that these companies are acting responsibly and paying these people better? So that, because by earning, that's how you get into the economy.
Yes. Just one comment regarding youthful participation.
And then I'll talk about ICO.
Yeah, shortly. Priscilla, you see, Dambisa Moyo, who is an economist, one time said that Uganda's economy and many African countries are what she defined as dual economies, that the gap between the rich and poor is actually very wide. And in Uganda, the rich constitute about maybe less than 10%. The rich control and own the factors of production. They have the land.
They can't reach 5%.
Okay, around there. They have the land, they have the capital, and they can afford the labor. So the young people of this country fall in the other 85–90% of the country's population.
Yeah.
They own no factors of production. They have no access to capital. They cannot afford labor. So our participation in the coffee process can only be in terms of offering labor. But if government can have good policies around workers and labor unions, then I think young people can participate as laborers. For as long as there are good policies, then I think the opportunities for us.
Good, but in a minute, ICO and its implications.
And I need to add something on what Moses has said.
No, I don't have time.
So labor, but along the value chain,
yes,
the youth can be enabled to actually engage in the business itself. On the ICO, I think that the implications is that you are moving away from a platform where major international policy decisions are being made. In other words, if you are in a platform like that, it should really be exceptional that things have become so difficult for you to disengage. But otherwise, you need to stick in there because the rules of the game that will impact on the farmers today and tomorrow are being framed and developed in those platforms.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Godba. And Moses, turning to Dr. Kiza Besigye. Doctor, from Kasangati, what are your parting shots on this conversation moving forward?
Well, I think that, you know, the coffee industry is extremely important for the country. I think that the parliament should be careful in continuing with that scam. From what I have heard in the studio, it seems they intend to just adjust a few things here and there in that horrible contract. And I think this is not something where you just tamper with, you just fidget with a few things. This whole thing is a scam. I think it should be treated as such.
Okay.
And if they don't, and I don't expect that they will, Ugandans, these are the very critical things on which Ugandans must assert their will. This is not a matter in which we still have faith in the institutions of the state.
Okay, also, Doctor, before you leave, we want to find out what's the treatment like under your house arrest?
Well, the situation has not changed since Thursday when I was violently apprehended and thrown back into my compound. There is a police truck staged outside my gate 24 hours a day. There are police trucks on various points around my residence. At any moment, there are at least about 8 police trucks guarding the area. There are very many policemen, I don't know how many, but certainly over 100 deployed around my residence. My residence is also bordered with others, so a number of us are all surrounded and inconvenienced. In fact, my immediate neighbor, who has some rusuku behind his house, his rusuku is part of the barracks where they are camped. They think maybe I will disappear in that rusuku, I don't know. And so the inconvenience is unbelievable. No visitors have been allowed since Thursday last week, or nobody has been allowed in. No vehicle is allowed out. That makes our own survival within the home quite difficult. Yesterday, for the first time, I received lawyers, my legal team, which passed through a lot of trouble to get here, and eventually they had to walk from the main road where the roadblock is up to the house. And so that is the situation in which we are. I have, of course, instructed our legal team to take advantage of previous orders that have been issued by courts, by the court here in Kasangati, by the High Court, ordering that this kind of barricading somebody at home is illegal and certainly unconstitutional and must be removed. But that if other orders are needed, that they proceed to court and get even more orders on this situation. In the meantime, the People's Front for Transition, which is the platform on which we try to organize and to rally the population of Uganda to free itself, is also engaged in examining the kind of political actions that are necessary to make sure that these violations, including my own rights violation, are challenged politically. So this, but the reason this is going on is no doubt the threat that the regime feels because of the inadequacy of governance that they have provided the country. Okay. They are not going to relent. This is only the beginning.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for making time for RCN Morning at NTV, and we trust that the legal process will go as desired. And thank you so much, Odega and Moses, also for contributing to this conversation.